Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends. It's a blessing to see you. In case we haven't been introduced before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And since we've already talked to the interesting person who wrote the thing we're going to explore today, in this episode we're reviewing role-playing game module I-9, Day of Al-Akbar. Written by a dear friend, Alan Hammack, who I did a full interview with, and which you absolutely should watch if you haven't yet. This module was published by TSR in 1986 for the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons system, now known as First Edition. It's compatible with any old school system, and if variety is a spice of life, this adventure is the spice you need in your life. When I say you need this adventure in your life, I don't say that lightly. In about 29 pages of text, plus many more in maps, one module effectively gives us 4 intertwined adventures, ranging from overland travel to dungeon exploration, chock full of crazy traps and challenges, city exploration, and information gathering, and you get a raid assaultant's palace, which I've always wanted to do. While I read an optimal path into the adventure, this is almost a higher level sandbox. Once the party gets to the city, they can tackle the challenges and objectives any way they want. A showcase of old school adventure writing with a stronger narrative structure than its predecessors, and notable in its encouraging of role-playing baked into the cake. I am a fan of this thing. Now let's see how it sells itself. Day of Al-Akbar. The land of Varir, a once peaceful desert country, dotted with oases, teeming with caravans, fell into the hands of infidels. The ruler, the dearly loved Sultan Amhara, was killed in the battle for the capital city of Khaybar. He left behind one of the greatest treasure stores ever amassed, jewels and coins, more than anyone had ever seen before or since. And in addition, the cup and talisman of Al-Akbar. A deadly plague sweeps your land. The holy men say if only they had the talisman, they could create cures for this dread disease. Many adventurers have tried and failed to find the cup and talisman. Now it is your turn. Find these treasures and save your people. The journey is exciting but treacherous. Do not be distracted by the exotic sights and sounds, the strange foods. You must avoid being discovered by Al-Farzikh and his brigands as you infiltrate the palace. Be wary. What is most beautiful may be most deadly, and what seems useless may be priceless. Before we get into the adventure itself, let's look at who made it. The lead credit is, as we said, Alan Hammack, best known for the classic AD&D First Edition tournament module, the Ghost Tower of Inverness, which is still played in RPG conventions to this day. He has many other credits to his name, including editing the gold standard espionage role-playing game Top Secret, and the second edition of Wild West shoot-'em-up role-playing game Boot Hill. He was one of the contributors to the infamous and still influential First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide with its prostitution table, and more. After being ousted in the Gygax Purge, where the new TSR owner got rid of the game's creator and many of its top talent, Alan went on to open and run the Lion and Unicorn game store in Birmingham, Alabama. Later on, he became a civil servant and retired after many years. All through this time, he was a regular on the RPG convention circuit, and he remains in the mix to this day. People across the country continue paying him to come run his classic games. And it was at North Texas RPG Con in a Boot Hill game that I first got to meet him. He's cool people. However, my personal fondness for the man does not color my opinion of the module. I am cruelest to those I love. The credits also list a developer, which usually means the person charged with overseeing the creation of new material, but who doesn't write it themselves. If you see Bruce Hurd as the developer on a product, you're probably going to have a good time, because this guy did quality work. Bruce talked his way into getting hired by Gary Gygax in 1983 to translate TSR games into French, because Bruce was French and saw a need he could fill. He didn't settle for doing translations, though, because he kept getting promoted. In 1985, he became TSR's acquisition coordinator, so basically the freelance writer wrangler, and a few years later, he headed the creative team for the world of Mystara in the D&D Basic Expert line. The Basic line is excellent, and hits D&D in a much different and amazing way than 5e, so check it out when you get a chance. Some basic D&D titles he oversaw the creation of, and some he wrote personally. To highlight just one of the major efforts he managed, I recommend the Gazetteer series, which is a masterwork of world building. Besides providing setting information on the different regions of Mystara, these things are so riddled with adventure ideas and inspiration that they can be used as campaign books as well. I dare anyone to read the Emirates of Ilarum and not have a ready-made campaign firing up their imagination. One of the funniest and most original RPG books I've ever read is one he wrote, Gazetteer 10, Orcs of Thar. This thing is hysterical, provides rules for playing humanoids, and I recommend the Lost Adventures review of an adventure made for it to get the flavor of what humanoid adventuring can be. Post-TSR, he kept at it as an indie publisher and ran with creating new projects based on his Mystara work, called The World of Kaladar. His products are available at DriveThruRPG, so maybe check them out. It was hard to find information on editor Karen S. Martin. Apparently she worked on the first edition Forgotten Realms box set, which is the best version of Forgotten Realms and everybody should use it. It's so much better than anything after 2E, where NPCs rob the realms of anything interesting for the players to do. They overshadow everything you could get involved in, so why bother? She may have done some of the art on Adventure OA2, Knight of the Seven Swords, but the most I could find on her came from this Dragon Magazine issue 120, where she received a one-page write-up. An avid gamer before she got into the industry, she was hired by Steve Winter. How many episodes of this channel is this guy going to pop up in? It's like everywhere I look, I see Steve Winter. So Steve hired her and put her to work on the Marvel Superheroes Advanced game. After that, she worked as a coordinator for Bruce Hurd in the acquisitions department, coordinating the editing work to be done and filling in herself when needed, including on this module. The bad news is that I don't think it's edited very well. For example, the party size and levels listed on the cover don't match those on the table of contents. This is a higher level module, and the lower levels listed in the table of contents will get eaten alive. There's more basic layout problems I found, and we'll talk about them as we go. As I was doing this research, a Facebook post popped up from Stan Brown about interviewing a Karen S. Conlon. I asked him if this is Karen S. Martin. He said yes, and pointed out the other last names she's used, including Boomgarden and Conlon. When I looked up Boomgarden, the gates opened up, and turns out she's worked on some of my favorite D&D products, ranging from Spelljammer, Al-Qadim, and Greyhawk, as well as my least favorite D&D setting, Birthright. Okay, I hate it. It's not my least favorite. It's my most hated. It's just garbage. She also worked on the Jade Hair, as did Bruce Hurd, which I previously reviewed and got so caught up on the writer, John Nephew, I didn't even go into Hurd or Boomgarden. The cover art by great Jeff Easley describes both Alan and mine's happy place. A wonderful harem filled with beautiful women with big, gorgeous hair. Ladies, this is what guys want. There were fewer gay guys when your hair was this high, and you know I'm right. Jeff Easley is one of the legendary artists of the TSR era whose art sold whatever it was slapped on and still does. If this is your first time hearing of Easley, Google Jeff Easley, Dragonlance, and enjoy the ride. Interior illustrations by Mark Nelson are strong throughout, even if there aren't a lot of them. In a 64-page module, we only get 5 pieces plus the pre-generated player character portraits. Well, we also get this pretty header art, but it's header art. I didn't miss the art though, because the writing is so evocative it painted the scenes in my mind. Before we move on though, absolutely also Google Mark Nelson Illustrator, because criminy this guy has made a ton of good stuff. In RPGs, comics, and elsewhere, treat your eyeballs to his work. Cartography by Diane and Dave Sutherland is strong, and we get a ton of maps, which is great. Problem is, the placement wasn't helpful, which is an editor problem. Sometimes the maps are co-located with the text describing them, and other times they are cast to the far ends of the book. Map 5 is in fact a player handout, not formatted like the other maps, and isn't marked as a map. At least in the PDF version, the maps are scattered around without rhyme or reason. The multi-part city map in the PDF took a little guesswork on how it goes together, but boy is it cool. Just look at the size and the detail on this thing. Typography by Betty Elmore is Olympic record-setting like always, and with that, it's time to drop a spoiler warning, because I wouldn't want to ruin any surprises for people who like surprises. But come on, let's not be coy. The word review is in the title. You clicked here to find out about this module, and if it's worth running and playing today. Here's your first spoiler. It is. So this is a beefy module. As we see in the table of contents, the 4 chapters correspond to the 4 adventure areas we get, and I contend that each is detailed enough to be its own adventure. You could easily get months of game time out of this thing. Moving to the introduction, Hammack gives us a 1-page primer on how to set up an adventure, because that's all the space he needs to convey a lot of useful details. He provides adventure background details for both the DM and players, gives careful instruction on running the adventure, how to read and use this module, how to use the player handouts, the maps, what the party composition should be. the dangers of not having strong enough characters to handle this module, and introduces the concept of the ability score check pretty well in a single paragraph. For random encounters, generally the DM should make 3 checks, 2 per day and 1 per night. Not only does Hammack hold the DM's hand here in the beginning, but all throughout the module he gives advice, tips, tricks, ideas of how things might play out, and jokes to support the DM's mood. It's nice and not cheesy and self-indulgent like I've read some other module writers do it. At the back, we get a page combining the monster stat table, a random encounter table that covers the desert, sewers, and K-Bar in one little table, and a random city event chart. Those city events range from sandstorms, a caravan coming to town, and random explosions. And random explosions? Jesus Christ, look at this thing. For city events, choose one event below. A, an explosion occurs in the building next to the party. A fire starts in the roof. 1d4 rounds later, a patrol arrives. Well, then we get the sandstorm. And C, during the night, a flight of 12 blue dragons pass over the city, dropping explosive devices. Like 12 blue dragons wasn't bad enough, but they also have explosives. Jesus Christ. Townspeople say it is a retaliation from a great northern empire, aroused by the mad dog of the desert's exactions in their land. What the hell? That's in the same chart as E, Day of the Pious. Everyone must remain at home and pray. So 12 blue drags with bombs, or stay home and pray. What the? And now that we've touched on the nuts and bolts, what's the story? Plague. Plague is what the story is. In this adventure background that both the players and the DM are supposed to have access to, I'm going to go ahead and read it to you because it really sets the stage. Know ye, O stranger, that this story begins long ago in the 7th dynasty of the Sultans of Arir. During the reign of Sultan Hammack, infidel invaders swarmed from the east, swallowing Aririan defenders and driving refugees before them. Their violent wave threatened even the magnificent capital city of K-Bar, in which Arir's greatest treasures were hidden for safekeeping. By repute, this treasure included more gems of all kinds than there were stars in the sky. And of course, the treasure beside which all others pale, the cup and talisman of Akbar. The cup and talisman, of course, were the great treasures which had to be protected at all costs. They were hidden in a place of safety, surrounded by guards and wards of organic, mystical, and mechanical nature. History records that the invaders were beaten off. Yeah, I bet they were. At the very gates of K-Bar, but the Sultan was tragically killed at the height of the fighting. He alone apparently knew the only safe method of retrieving the cup and talisman and the rest of the treasure. For many spiritual and temporal leaders made bold proclamations about being appointed by Providence to lead Arir, followed inevitably by an expedition to retrieve the cup and talisman, from which none ever returned. K-Bar never recovered from the economic loss of its treasury, nor the loss in prestige as the home of the cup and talisman, and was removed as capital and rapidly acquired the loathsome reputation it has today, teeming hive of violence and villainy. A plague now sweeps the land. Red blotches on the chest mark the onset of the disease, and within a few days death is imminent. The elder priests of all temples of law and good put aside their differences and banded together to fight the plague. They agree that if the cup and talisman could ever be found and reunited, curing balms could be made in enough quantity to stop the disease. This must be done soon, for traders have already stopped dealing with Arir in the hopes of keeping the plague confined. The quarantine is severe. Travelers and immigrants are turned away or killed. You and some companions have been chosen for this quest. The promise that you can keep whatever else you find along the way has your eyes sparkling with anticipation. Will you find treasure now to start your own kingdom? Or will you find death's bony hand beckoning to you on this adventure from which none have returned before? I think that's a pretty good setup. It sets some stakes, and it says that some serious stuff is coming your way. After that common lore, the DM gets more and pointers on things to think about. The party starts in the city of Bergathi, a bustling city on the banks of the mighty river Chaud, a trade route connecting it with the east. Bergathi is considered to be the westernmost refuge of civilization for hundreds of leagues, now that K-Bar has fallen into decline. Time is of the essence because people are dying every day. The party has 11 days to find the sacred relics and return with them, or else it will be too late. Bergathi will be doomed. The elders provide the party with camels and supplies for the trip to K-Bar, and Hammack addresses the survival concerns of crossing the desert. The track the caravans use to follow is well known, so there's little chance of getting lost if you stick to the track. A trek straight across the desert of Arir is possible and much shorter, but is not recommended because of the chances of getting lost. The elders explain to the party they must enter the sewers below the city of K-Bar to avoid the bandits in the city and find the object of their quest. And now there's no map of K-Bar or its sewer systems, at least that's available to the party. However, the elders recall caves opening at the bottom of the plateau on which Kabar sits, about a mile northeast from the legendary city. The caves may connect directly with the sewers. The pack animals can be hidden here if so desired, they advise. One key point that the DM, but not the players, should be aware of is that the temple elders have made a mistake. The talisman is indeed hidden within the underground burial chamber. But at the last minute, the Sultan Amhara got worried about hiding the two precious items together and disguised and hid the cup in the pool in his own palace. Now, before the party leaves, an elder touches the forehead and breast of each of the adventurers with a glowing red gem. The elders explain that if the person with whom the stone is associated grows weak, the ruby will dim. If the person dies, the gem will become dull and lustreless. In this way, the elders will be aware of the fate of the party should its members meet an untimely end. Now, that's some neat flavor text. It doesn't come up again in the adventure, or at least in any useful way, but it's a good way of freaking out your players. So like I said, we got 4 adventures here: a desert journey, the sewer dungeon, city exploration, and the Sultan's palace. There's so much here in level of detail, witty lines, and solid adventure material that I'm going to give summaries of what each part is about, how they connect to each other, and showcase highlights that really make each stand out. So Chapter 1, Desert Travel. The Desert of Arir is a vicious combination of sand desert and salt flat. The escarpments to the north are treacherous and sheer. The track that trade caravans use is barely perceptible, but it has the advantages of staying close to the escarpment for protection from the cruel sun and having water sources at strategic points. If the party stays on the track, there's only 1 chance in 10 per hex of getting lost, which would be a problem because you have a ticking time clock of when you have to be back. So let's break this down for a minute. We get told that the terrain ahead of us usually allows for 15 miles of travel per day. However, there are only 13 hours of light available, including dawn and twilight baked into the cake. And travel at night is permitted, but the chance of getting lost reverts to the standard 4 desert, 4 chances in 10 instead of 1 in 10. So when you take a look at this map and do the math, on camels, not on foot, which gets way worse, but on camels, it would take 4.5 days if you follow the trail for the party to get from Bergathi to Kabar. Now, they only have 11 days to do all this. That's quite a bit of time burned. And that means, so to make the same trip back is another 4.5 days. So out of 11 days total, the party will have burned 9 days if everything goes well, if they follow the trail. So if they go cross country though, it's 2.5 days using that 13 miles per day number. And so that's only 5 days if they go cross country, but that's way more dangerous. And so there's not a lot of time built in for the player characters to screw around or spend healing up, which was way slower in first edition. So that ticking time clock, that's for real in this module. And one other danger I want to point out is that all mounts which enter a desert hex next to a hex containing water will immediately strive to move towards the water source and drink. Well, what's the problem there? Drinking results in the loss of at least 1 hour of time. Okay, there's that bet. But one of those watering holes is called the Lake of Death. It's a large salt lake in the center of the flats. And if your mounts are not prevented from going there, the mounts will drink the salt water and die within 1d12 hours. That's terrible. Oh, by the way, there's a 10% chance that any oasis has been poisoned by underground seepage and will have the same effects as the water from the Lake of Death. So there are problems here. And if you go to a salt marsh hex or something like it, that's already terrible and will kill your pets. So just getting there is dangerous. Oh, and that's not counting the random encounters or the 3 mandatory encounters that are going to happen regardless of which way they go. So there's a little bit of DM fiat here, but it's just to make sure that something interesting is going to happen on the way. The first mandatory encounter we've got is the Worm of the Desert. You are each riding 1 camel. The sun has been descending past its zenith for 2 hours on the 2nd day of your journey when something unusual happens. The camels become skittish as a low rumbling seems to come from the ground. Suddenly, cracks form in the rock and the sand slowly pours into the dark crevices. A huge purple worm pops out of the sand about 10 feet away from the last camel in the party. The worm attacks that camel and its rider first because it can fit both in its mouth and it wants to eat the camel. Holy crap. So this purple worm might eat a camel and a PC. So the players got some fun to deal with here. Now, if they do defeat the creature before it runs away and they go through its gizzards, because all good player characters should disembowel everything they meet apparently, it is loaded with treasure, so it is worth your time. The second encounter, on a different day, called Bolts from the Blue. It is near midday on the 3rd day of your trek, and the desert heat is at its worst. As you near the crest of a dune, it seems your prayers have been answered, for you feel the welcome touch of a cooling breeze caress you. At the top of the dune, you see a strange cloud, dense and compact. yellowish green in color. It is moving quickly towards you. The cloud's bottom appears to be only 20 or 30 feet above the sands. There appear to be lightning discharges within the cloud, but none are striking the earth. No rainfall is visible underneath the cloud. The strong breeze cools the sweat on your back as you watch the cloud draw nearer. Well, the cloud's a harmless illusion, and it certainly doesn't cause the breeze, which is coming from behind the party. That's from Malfort, a very old, huge blue dragon. Holy crap, he's here to ruin your day. Malfort can speak and cast spells, by the way, and its lair is miles away in a cavern with a very well-hidden entrance, and it's irrelevant to the outcome of the adventure, but he does give you some details about how the party can find it if they want to follow up on this later. So the dragon always flies overhead first, using its fear aura to cause the camels to throw their riders and flee in panic like you do. The dragon, on the same pass, uses a breath weapon on as many of the characters as possible. On the following round, the dragon wheels around and lands. The party should be able to engage in melee with the creature on the third round. So you have this big problem just come out of nowhere in the sky, and in the sixth round of combat, a mysterious green cloud envelops the PCs and dragon alike. At that point, the dragon decides to use its breath weapon again. When this occurs, read the section below to the players. The old blue dragon rears his mighty head. A gesture you know means the breath weapon is about to strike. With a sinking feeling, you prepare for the shock should the dragon choose you for its target. The thick yellowish green of the cloud billows about you, and as the bolt of electricity leaves the dragon's mouth, the universe seems to explode, but the bolt never reaches you. As you realize in horror that the green cloud has turned into a howling wind that is sucking you into some sort of abyss. The shrieking dragon is now spiraling into the weird blackness, letting forth a final mighty roar of rage as he vanishes. Suddenly silence and light prevail. A 10-foot-tall man is standing where the vortex used to be. Large double wings protrude from his back. His skin glints with the colors of bronze, copper, and gold. In his belt is a huge sword glowing with bright light. He slowly turns toward your party, observing each of you silently, his eyes sparkling like topazes, full of intelligence, compassion, and wisdom. So this guy is Cerberus, a solar sage who came to help and enlighten the party in the ways of the universe. He apologizes for being late, introduces himself, and without answering the party's questions, he takes a highbrow, professorial attitude, explaining the following: a ton of gibberish that is Alan clearly screwing with the players who are not going to understand anything this guy's talking about. I mean, I've got it on the screen. You can read this yourself. Addressing the players as scholars, he talks about a pseudo-resilient nexus of incredible magnitude, more commonly referred to as a common overlapping juncture, affecting our spatio-temporal continuum between dimensions and planes of our sentient universe, and blah blah blah, extra sentient fabric of sequential reality, alternate times and parallel voids. Only rarely has there been a nexus involving several worlds like the one just encountered. Some sort of dimensional rift opened right then, and that's a problem, and he's here to solve it. Then he talks about Draco Electricus, specimen's massive energetical vibratory discharge combined with his powerful magical dwemmers, amplified that of the party, and ultimately co-affected a unique catalytic phenomenon that shattered the feeble nodal skeins of the intradimensional nexus, causing a multidimensional vortex more powerful than the ether cyclones in the astral plane. All of this quite naturally boosts magnetic fluxes and refluxes. Oh, for the love of God. So there's a dimensional rift. He showed up to fix it. Points out that there's going to be problems down the line that might affect them because everybody knows that they're going for the cup and talisman of Al-Akbar, and both good and bad want it for themselves. Now, the good want the players to get it so they can do the good thing and help Bargathi. The bad want to take it and destroy it. You can have all kinds of fun with this, and he encourages you to do that, to mess with your players as long as you think it's entertaining. Before finally, he raises his hand and sword, and any player characters slain by the dragon are now alive and at full strength, and all wounds have been healed. Oh, and your camels that ran off, they all show up right here and are calmly waiting for you. He also refills your water skins with cold, clear water, which tastes like the headwaters of a mountain stream. So this is a good bit of what the hell, but it keeps you on your toes. And finally, we get the border of death. Shortly before daybreak, a fanatic assassin sent by the mad dog of the desert creeps into the party's camp. He attempts to crawl up to a camel and conceal a fist-sized metal sphere in one of the packs. If he thinks he's been spotted, the assassin tries to flee southward, dropping the sphere in the middle of the camp instead. If the assassin has not been spotted, he leaves a message near the camel saying, "Death to the imperialist merchants! You will not live to regret crossing the border of death. Wind of the desert." Soon after the assassin breaks away from the camp, a brief sandstorm covers his footsteps. The party has no chance of finding him. If examined, the metal sphere shows small squares sculpted onto its surface, with the ring affixed to the top. The item has no power of itself. However, a special delayed blast fireball has been cast on the sphere to explode 1 hour after the ring is pulled off, causing 14d6 damage within a 2-inch radius globe, and that's probably 10 feet these days. So grenade bombs. That's what the guy has. He has grenade bombs. And the assassin, if they catch him somehow, he is totally insane. He claims to be an obscure prophet seeking to avenge the destruction of the Akbar realm. Anyone crossing the border is to be executed immediately. The party cannot learn anything else from this madman. Now, if they search his pockets, they're going to find some false identity papers, looking like he's from a neighboring realm, a dagger and some poison, and some other stuff. He also got a map showing a camp that's apparently a few miles south of the trail, which, if the player characters go and check out, looks like a terrorist training camp. There's straw practice targets with several large holes blasted nearby. Apparently, the terrorists have blown out of this camp. And so this is another instance of what the hell going on here. And that is the end of the overland adventure. So you get all that in 2 pages. There's a lot going on, and even more that you can do with that thing in 2 pages. And I like that he emphasizes a survival resource management scheme in that section. And moving on to chapter 2, the sewers of Akbar. You can now smell the salty sebkas of the once great river Tal, now a sluggish, muddy wood, barely sufficient to provide life. Everything in the region seems to be in a state of decline and decay. The sun is ending its daily journey across the sky. A great walled city appears above the final great Hamada. A barred drainage tunnel leads into the Wed in the southwest side of the Kasbah. You're approaching from the northeast and are approximately a mile away from the walls. So perhaps a little bit out of place here, we've got a description of the 2 competing leaders and their factions in the city of Akbar. You have a small army of brigands led by an assassin, Al-Farzikh, and his thief assistant, Vatak Bey. So he holds the city, and the civilians that live there are simply a few servants and tradesmen there to provide services for that army. Most of their wealth comes from extorting tariffs from passing caravans, because Akbar is an oasis, however bleak, along a major trade route. Now the other one we just touched on, and that is the elusive leader who calls himself Wind of the Desert. But the locals often nickname him the Mad Dog of the Desert. This is the terrorist leader. He believes no caravans at all should cross the desert, and those responsible for Akbar's decay should be punished. He owns a private force of a dozen fanatic assassins to carry out his policies. The Mad Dog seriously thinks about taking over the city. So if we're getting in and out of the sewers, there's actually 3 ways in and out. The drainage gate accessed from outside the city walls, a drain tunnel in the city, and a drain tunnel inside the Sultan's palace. So the optimal path that I read into this adventure assumes the party follows the advice of the elders and heads straight into the sewers. But Hammack provides directions if they do otherwise. He wargames out different approaches the PCs might take, and I found it helpful in fleshing out the game environment with little useful details that make it a fully lived-in place. It's also important for the players to think about sneaking in to the sewers from the outside, because there's guards up on those walls who will spot them, and if they do, when the players come back out the same way they went in, there's going to be a nasty ambush waiting for them. There's so much material here that we would be here for hours if I were to go over all of it. So I'm going to pick out select scenes from each of the next 3 adventures that I feel really highlight some of the interesting things I found in this module. Sure, there's carrion crawlers, a gibbering mouther, a lurker, but then there's this bastard. In room 7, 3 heads are better than 1. In the last several decades, the Gorgimera, what? A Gorgon Chimera? Oh, that's awful. Dwelling here has been the reason why no one has reached the secret chamber. Above this area is a drainage shaft that leads up to the city. The lid is loose, and the Gorgimera can leave if it needs to. Oh, that's good. He can be on the loose. The brutal but practical government of cutthroats in the city above find that dropping rule breakers, merchant victims, and undesirables down these shafts not only rids them of troublesome people, but also keeps down hunting flights of the monster. Holy crap! And of course this thing, because it can turn people to stone with its breath, will always make at least 1 breath weapon attack before the party could close for melee. And that's either going to be fire breath or petrification. Either way, it's not good. And these people are so awful, they use a Gorgimera as a garbage disposal for the town's unwanted. Oh, this is bad. But if the players defeat it, they can find a map case with a crude map of the immediate area of the sewers, along with a little bit of treasure. But that map can help them find a secret door, which is important, because this is a lost tomb. There are secret doors and traps galore in here. But like that map, there's also clues to help the party. You get pit traps, acid spraying fungus just dumps buckets on you, which has to be rancid, fire traps, released mummy swarms, smack talk, time warps, brain-eating earworms, and more. There's also maze elements here with dead ends, false doors, and obstacles the paranoid guy who built it put in before he went. And once you get far enough in, you get this thing. Oh, I love it. Room 10, a devilish illusion. 60 feet up the corridor, a glowing humanoid shape walks towards you with a slight limp. His skin has a reddish cast, and there are 2 small horns growing out of his forehead. You now see that the limp is caused by a cloven hoof in the place of his left foot, and there is a short, barbed tail dragging along the ground behind him. His rod is topped with a carving of a coiled serpent with a demonic skull. He is quite handsome and is smiling as he walks toward you, although in a not altogether pleasant manner. He stands 50 feet away from you and speaks in a voice which resonates inside your head in your native language. The voice is firm and compelling, and you have the feeling you should agree with what he says. The voice laughs evilly and says, "Long have I awaited such a harvest of souls, children of law and good. I'm afraid I cannot let you interfere with my plans any longer. Prepare to die." So saying, he points his rod, and a narrow red beam of very intense energy streaks towards you. The glowing humanoid, the door, and the north corridor are illusions programmed to strike fear into possible grave robbers. It's fake. It's an illusion. The real corridor actually turns right 30 feet away from the stairs, the illusion concealing that exit. Now, do not prevent the cleric types in the party from believing this is Dissipator, the archdevil. In case of a turning attempt, roll a d20 and act disappointed as Dissipator apparently backs off. If the party casts spells such as Fireball or Lightning Bolt, remember the space is limited and the corridor to the north does not exist. If missiles are shot at the illusion, it seems they hit their target, they actually hit the wall. If someone closes to engage in melee with the illusory devil, that PC runs into the wall at the end of the real corridor. The illusion conceals spikes covering the wall. The illusion immediately disappears. Run Dissipator any way possible to prolong the party's belief that he is real. Simply standing there, surrounded by flames and laughing, casting harmless pyrotechnics, requiring phony saving throws, and so forth. If a player rolls an obvious miss on a saving throw, inform him in a meaningful tone that there is no apparent immediate effect. And there are some false treasure rooms in here. I mean, they have treasure in them, but they are also fake. They are also not the end objective, why the players are in the sewer, such as the false treasure room 9D. This large rectangular room seems to be filled with gold. Thieves' eyes twinkle merrily as they gaze upon 3 long tables covered with aging golden velvet, each bearing coffers and chests full of coins, cups, and jewelry of the precious sun metal. At the far end of the room is a large golden throne, where sits a grinning skeleton dressed in tattered finery. A gold crown of 5 points rests upon its skull, and gleaming rings bedeck its bony fingers. One hand grasps an empty chalice, as if the skeleton has been waiting to drink a toast of greeting to newcomers. Upon each wall hangs tapestries of intricate weave, depicting scenes of glorious victories and battles from Arir's past. All that gold velvet? No. That's, everything on this table is made of base metals, but it's covered with gold mold, a variety of yellow mold that has exactly the same color as gold, but acts like yellow mold, which is bad. And the skeleton, that's a thief who made it this far and couldn't get back out. Turns out this treasure behind a secret door is a deception. The real treasure is behind another secret door because the guy who made it was paranoid and rich. So the players got to keep going. Now there's yet another treasure room that's not quite what they're looking for. The minor treasure room. Now it's full of treasure that amounts to 1,000,000 gold pieces in value, but this ain't the place. It's got a bunch of cursed items in it as well. Now, in order to get through it, the players will have to do a lot of interaction with their environment, and it's going to take teamwork to set it all up. So the players have to think their way through the mechanisms to get through the next secret door and get closer to the tomb of Amhara. And along the way, there's this thing called the riddle room. Oh man, this is just one giant trap floor that shoots lots of lightning at people, and it is tough. There is a helpful poem that can help the players navigate it, but they have to be able to figure it out. This place is lethal. There's energy blasts. You can't teleport, and if you fly, you get shot by the electrical discharges. This is a tough room to get through. Weak parties will not make it, but after enough troubles and enough secret doors, they finally get to the Sultan's tomb. So in room 25, the Sultan's tomb, the room is pentagonal, with the door you have just entered forming one vertex. Along the 10-foot high ceiling in 5 locations are the illuminating crystal spheres you've seen before, although they are now partially masked, and a tube directs the light of each into a round spot directed towards the center of the room. In the center is a large marble sarcophagus. On the lid lies a life-size bas-relief sculpture of a somewhat portly man, dressed regally, wearing a turban and scimitar. Hidden in plain sight, for a fine marble dust covers the talisman, which makes it appear as part of the carving of the sarcophagus, which is actually empty. And if the players open it, you're supposed to say it makes a slight whoosh sound and make everybody nearby roll a saving throw. The saving throw is just a way of making the players nervous. It doesn't actually do anything. But here is the talisman of Akbar. So the players will have one of the 2 items they went out and searched for, but the other one isn't here, like we mentioned. The previous Sultan was too paranoid and put it somewhere else. Now, that undead that's guarding the place. When the secret door opens, a faint noise warns the PCs that something is occurring behind them. A 3-foot opening appears as part of the walls slide open. A skeletal figure wearing a brown hooded robe steps out, motions with its hand, and speaks up in a deep voice. "Once again, desecrators of the dead come to despoil my tomb. I shall let the gods decide who shall live, and the rest will be disintegrated into dust." The creature is not the defunct Sultan Amhara, it's a crypt thing, whose major desire is to create discord and confusion, and he does that because he can't disintegrate anybody, he can teleport them away. And so if someone fails to save first death magic, they're teleported to the locations indicated below, you roll on a table. But to everybody else in the room, their buddy just disappeared. So it appears the crypt thing can back up its trash talk. Now, he's not actually that good in a fight. He's very takeable. And once he teleports a single party member, he quickly retreats into the secret compartment. And the party has to break through 8 inches of hard rock to reach the thing, or cast a knock spell to get through it, and at that point, it's friggin' screwed. But it will threaten you with a bunch of idle curses the whole way to its second death. Leaving the sewers back through the caves, well, that's probably going to get the party ambushed if they weren't careful, like we talked about earlier. Because once they come out of the drainage system into the outside, they hear the call of a bird. However, if a ranger or druid's in the party, they know that's a forest bird that doesn't live anywhere near here. That is a signal for a whole bunch of bandits to pop out and jump the party. Oh yeah, they have traps on their side with a net of entrapment they've got buried under the mud, so they can snatch the party with that. And yeah, this is going to be a tough fight, so there's a high chance that the party will lose this engagement. And the bandits aren't interested in killing them, they're just going to rob them, particularly if they have the talisman, and then send them packing. Now, obviously, that is a setback. And we get all of that and way more in 8 pages. Then we move on to the city, or beyond the walls, which I guess should be inside the walls. Here you get to use this boss map to represent the city of Kabar, which you should reveal as the party explores it. And like we mentioned, the place is now run by the bandit king Al-Fazik, who proclaimed himself a sultan. And the brigands that he has generally occupy the city, while a corps of Mamluk soldiers under the great mufti's orders guard the palace itself. At its peak, the walled city of Kabar was merely the hub of a sprawling metropolis, with suburban buildings of the less wealthy extending for hundreds of acres in all directions. The land along the river was jealously guarded and reserved by royal decree for farming. The buildings were made of sun-dried mud, of which there was a plentiful supply, but these and the fields were destroyed by the Great Invasion long ago. Rubble surrounds the walled city, and no shelter remains out there, so if the players want to get out of the elements, they have to go in there. Now, how do they get in there? Do they go in through the sewers? Do they come over the wall somehow? Do they disguise themselves as merchants and come in that way? How do the characters want to get in? And then once they get there, how do they blend in? Because there are street patrols that know who the locals are on the look for strangers, and if someone came in that they don't recognize, they're going to shake them down and they're probably going to attack them. Now, there's only 3 patrols per day, and there is a finite number of these brigands, so you could, in fact, slowly kill off the entire army, and their officers and the assassins. So you could destroy the entire garrison. But how you enter and how you blend in makes a difference here. And there is a curfew, so if you're out after dark, the patrols are going to be on you. Now, what are the players doing in this place? Well, the problem is the PCs at best have only one of the holy items. They still need the second one. So where is it? Maybe somebody in the town knows something about it. And there's incentives built into the encounters all throughout to encourage exploration and talking to the locals, because they may be able to help and provide intel on the layout of the palace. So if the players want to go investigate in there, they won't be going in blind, but only if they talk to the locals. And so that dimensional rift that happened in the first section, well, it has attracted some very unusual monsters and other creatures to K-Bar that the players might have to worry about. And the characters' experiences in the city are far more exciting than the humdrum routine that the permanent residents of K-Bar endure. At the same time those monsters have come in, the Mad Dog of the Desert, who is aware of the PC's presence here, has decided it's time to stage a coup against Al-Farzik. And anytime the party leaves a building, there's a 10% chance one of the Mad Dog's assassins drops an explosive device there. So it's going to be some hot times in K-Bar tonight. We get 20 pages of material here, and this doesn't include the Sultan's Palace. That gets its own section. There are interesting businesses and detailed personalities throughout, making K-Bar a solid candidate for a home base, or at least a city the party can visit again in the future. And it also shows the DM how to make a town, how to populate it, how to make it interesting, and how to set it up. Most locals resent the bandits ruining the town and can help the party. They can earn friends on the inside, including a polyphant, to help them as part of that dimensional rift that opened earlier. Picking only a few places to show off, we start with Omar Balalaika's barrels. Unsurprisingly, this is a barrel maker. He's dark-haired, of early middle-age, thin mustache, looks up from his workbench, smiles and greets you with a thick northeastern accent. Welcome, my name Omar is. What can I do for you today, comrade? Now, Omar's a good guy, he's a cooper, and he calls himself Omar in the presence of strangers, but his real name is in fact Yuri. Yuri is an accomplished musician, but was driven out of his home kingdom when a song he was performing offended a high-ranking official. It seems that rather derisive lyrics had recently been put to that music, which Yuri had been playing in all innocence, and the noble decided that Yuri was a subversive and should be deported to the frozen archipelago in the north. Yuri escaped and made his way to K-Bar, rightly guessing that it was far enough away from everything to make a continued hunt for him impractical. Although this was several years ago, he still has a rather thick accent, including an occasional odd sentence construction. When Yuri decides that the PCs are not agents from his homeland, he's very friendly, offering them drinks of a potent, clear liquor distilled from rye. He does not appear at first to have any useful information for the party, but if asked about any local songs concerning the Holy Cup and Talisman of Al-Akbar, he remembers something. One obscure lay of local origin, which has a nice melody with some musically intriguing passages, mentions the cup and talisman in passing. The lyrics, which seem nonsensical, are "Ye sword of the dead points to ye star, all in stone. Val ye cup, light of ye great one, awaits in watery repose." The first two lines are clues to the resting place of the talisman in the sarcophagus, while the second two lines give a hint as to the hiding place of the cup, disguised as a light and underwater in the palace pool. So this one merchant can give them critical information to help them find both items. Pretty helpful if the players go and talk to the guy. And we get that throughout. And then in 36, from Yusuf Al-Sidi Yahya, the small gnome does laundry for Al-Farzik's troops. He's also the premier tailor of K-Bar, and he's quite talented at it. Now, he's been in many parts of the Sultan's palace, and for a donation of 10 gold or more, he can tell the players about where the barracks are, what that setup's like, the Sultan's bedchamber, the harem and its pool, the Great Mufti's office, and the large reception area. And if the players want to try to impersonate some of the brigands, he could sell them some of their clothes to help them blend in. So this one NPC can give all kinds of details about the layout of the Sultan's palace, including the room where the cup is at. A good gnome is a good friend. Now this thing, the Golden Crescent Bakery. This is some shit right here. Delicious smells emanate from the windows and doors of this establishment. It appears to be an excellent bakery, specializing in crispy croissants, small square cakes of chocolate, and cookies of oatmeal and raisin. All characters walking within 10 feet of the establishment must make saving throws versus spells or be compelled to enter the shop. When opening the door, the PCs are surprised to see a whirlwind of activity as two brownies with incongruously glum expressions bustle about from mixing table to ovens to storeroom, preparing large quantities of these treats. Now, if you failed that saving throw, you have to buy and eat one of the small cakes at the outrageous price of 10 silver pieces each. Now, each cake satisfies the desire for the next round, but if the character's still within 10 feet of the premises on the third round, he's got to make another saving throw, and that keeps going on. For every 2 cakes that are consumed, 1 tankard of goat's milk must be bought for 12 silver pieces and drunk. There are no long-term deleterious effects except to the characters' purses, though they may feel the need to exercise after an eating binge. These brownies, named Keeblar and Keeblor, are cousins who were ensorcelled by the proprietor of the shop, an evil witch magic user called the Crescent Witch. After fearfully looking around to make sure the witch is not near, they relate their story, if the party so inquires. It seems that Keeblar and Keeblor made their homes in a far forest in the north, baking goodies for all the woodland beings. The witch, researching a spell to extract blood from a turnip, smelled the delicious aroma, recognized its magical qualities, and was quick to consider the commercial possibilities. She cast a gish spell from a scroll she had, forcing them to work for her for 10 years at slave wages. So we have enslaved, baking Keebler elves in this module. Straight up. That is exactly what's happening. D&D is so cool. It even turned Keebler elves into an adventure opportunity. The brownies tell the PCs that it takes a wish to break the gish, looking at them with a faint hope showing in their big, tearful eyes. If the party decides to use a wish, Keeblar and Keeblor assist the PCs in their next unfriendly encounter. More importantly, all PCs who argued for the usage of the wish in this manner get a 20% bonus to their experience points scored at the end of the adventure. This, after all, is the ultimate test of good alignment, to sacrifice something valuable and useful to aid another. And who says alignment doesn't make any difference? PCs who did not argue for the usage but agreed at the end receive a 10% experience bonus. Those who neither argued for nor agreed with the usage do not gain any bonus. Also, there's an interesting look at how magic can impact commerce found in location 53, Jamila's Fish Market. Now you might ask, why is there a fish market this far into the desert? Well, it's because Jamila gets frozen fish from a coastal city through a deal with a magic user who's quite accomplished but financially down and out right now, who freezes the fish with an ice spell and then teleports himself and the fish here. So these fish sell for 50 gold apiece, but they're good. So that's a neat way of tackling the question, what would an economy that has magic as a possibility in the world look like? Well, frozen fish delivery. While some of the town's NPCs are helpful, some are neutral, some will rat you out and get you screwed over, such as at 56, Abdullah's bank. And yes, you go in here and you can talk to the banker, Abdullah El Dinar, a poor but honest merchant, and he asks how he can help you. Or he looks like a large fat man, but most of his bulk is muscle. But he tries to show off as a fat guy who poses no real threat, so he can really kick the shit out of somebody who tries him because he's a 4th level monk. Now he's a money changer, and he buys and sells information. For some money, he can give information about the Sultan's palace, and he even offers for an additional bribe to forget that he ever met the PCs. Well, that's a lie, because the second they close for the day, Abdul and his guards head straight for the palace to inform on the strangers. There's a brothel, of course, and the comeliness stat shows up because that was a weird addition in some variations of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons back in the day for those who wanted to differentiate between appearance and personality. And you can also get rumors. There's danger, more curses, and evil entities that may follow and accost the party. Oh, and did I mention terrorist bombings? Now here we also get leaving K-Bar, which we still have more adventure to go, but we get leaving K-Bar right here. And it talks about different possibilities the players may have for getting out of the city, such as teleporting, making the overland journey back, but it also reiterates the 11-day timeline and how if the party takes more than 11 days, everybody's screwed. Now, if the party gets back to Bargothi with the Cup of Talisman in 11 days or less, the High Priest can raise any fallen party members whose bodies were recovered for no charge, and he'll get to them when he gets to them. And the party will also be asked if they want to make some donations because there's high cost to all the relief work they've been doing, and there's no penalty for not donating to the cause, but any character doing so receives an extra experience point bonus equal to the value in gold pieces of the donation. Now, DM, make sure everyone has a chance to declare his donation before the experience bonus is made known. Donations made after the announcement are accepted, but do not win extra XPs. Again, playing a good character makes a difference here. See, there are things you can do with alignment in Dungeons & Dragons. You can reward goodness. And now that the city's been seen to, we're in the final chapter, the Sultan's Palace. Although quite formidable in appearance, the palace is inadequately guarded because of the small numbers of the controlling group. There's always 2 Mamluks assigned to each of the 4 walls, plus 1 in each tower and turret. And each turret contains a gong which can be rung to sound the alarm. There are patrols, and if players get in any fights after each combat, keep on crossing brigand and soldier casualties off the roster from Chapter 3 because you can kill your way through the entire garrison. As the party sneaks into the palace, the Mad Dog of the Desert sends his assassins in as well. They're hiding in various areas of the palace, waiting for a signal to attack the Sultan. The assassins, all dressed in black jalabas, avoid the PCs in the palace, and the chapter should be played in regards to the climax that occurs in the Sultan's bedchamber. Because you get a Burn Baby Burn Disco Inferno 3-way fight in that place between the Sultan's forces, the party, and the terrorists with the bombs. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on in this module. And the players can help instigate a coup and replace the Sultan with a good guy. And you can get in a fight in a hammam with a guy with a towel around his waist. These are interesting things to do and locations to have fights in, which is what you want in an adventure. Memorable encounters and locations. Also, normies live here, so do try to not kill everybody if you're playing through this. And that good guy we're talking about could replace the Sultan? Well, that would be his servant, the Grand Mufti, his palace guard. Now, the Grand Mufti is lawful good, and other details in the adventure point out he's actually a legitimate heir to the throne. He's been minding his nose, but if things go right in conversation with the players, because he will talk to them if given the chance, they can end the terror that's been ruining Akbar this whole time. Now, the palace is a dynamic location because you've got pit traps that are monitored by the palace guards who will activate it, deactivate it, interrogate player characters that have fallen into it. We'll set up traps for those who fall into it and get out of it. Or you can sneak by them, you really can. And they have check-in desks, they really do. This is a moving, active environment, and so the players could get caught with their pants down in many different areas. Now here I want to talk about the Bey's quarters. This is the lieutenant of the Sultan, Vatak Bey. Now he's not a good guy, and he's usually busy elsewhere during the day, but at night you can find him in here with a companion who probably wasn't willing to be here, but that's the way of the world. And if a PC has been kidnapped as an addition to the harem earlier in the adventure, because that's a thing that could happen, she is tied up in this room when the party enters. Now you can get the Bey to talk because if you threaten him with enough overwhelming force, and he'll spill an important secret that Al-Farzik has been keeping him loyal through a residual poison that he gives Vatak the antidote to every day to keep him from dying. And if the party can cast a neutralized poison on Vatak, he will flip on the Sultan as fast as possible. Now, he's still not a good guy and will try to turn on the party later on, but at least that'll be one bad Sultan down. Now, that three-way showdown I was talking about, yeah, that happens in the Sultan's chamber and his harem. A dozen brigands and jalabas are talking in this room, their attention drawn to a map pinned on the back wall with a dagger. This large square room is a height of opulent display. The bedposts of a huge canopy bed are delicately wrought iron coated with a layer of gold paint. Thin silken veils hang from the canopy, enclosing the bed. Rich oriental carpets and tapestries cover the walls and floor. So if they haven't been encountered elsewhere, both the Sultan and his lieutenant are found in this room planning a raid on Bergothi. They aren't aware of the plague that's going on there, and neither any of their brigand leaders who are here. If the party attacks the brigands, 1d4 rounds later, all remaining assassins and the Mad Dog himself suddenly charge into the room, indifferently attacking brigands, Sultan, and PCs alike. The Mad Dog has chosen this moment to perpetrate his coup and get rid of the Sultan and the infidel PCs at the same time. So we could have two different coups going on here. Wait, no, three different coups. A whole bunch of coups going on in Akbar. They enter through the various secret entrances, which are known to them, and the main door. Using the same passages, 1d4 rounds later, all remaining Mamluk soldiers, their officers, and the Great Mufti charge into the room, attacking the assassins, the brigands, and their evil leaders. The soldiers have been ordered to spare the player characters and eventually defend them in case of trouble. The Great Mufti has seized this unexpected opportunity to overthrow the evil Sultan and rid the city of the Mad Dog of the desert. So this fight is going to be bonkers because you have all these different factions coming in trying to murder the shit out of each other. Most of them are trying to kill the players, and there's going to be bombs going off, and bombs that turned out to be duds too, thrown into the mix. So players will never know which bomb is a dud and which one's a threat until it's kind of too late. Every time an explosive device is revealed, all the assassins, brigands, and Mamluks suddenly dive to the ground behind furniture expecting an explosion. One PC may attempt to grab an explosive on a successful dexterity check and throw it out of the room. If either the assassins or the brigands win the fight, they seek to immediately execute surviving player characters. If the Mufti and his Mamluks win, the PCs may either be expelled from the city if there is no previous alliance, or their bargain will be respected, in case they had that talk previously. A secret passage to the west leads to the harem. The previous sultans and Al-Farzik use it to visit their wives and concubines, and Al-Farzik also has his treasure in there. It's not inconsiderable. It's pretty cool, and the players may enjoy securing a particular magic item in case they were ambushed outside the sewers, because that net of entrapment that got used on them is in here. And there's also a gallon of poison antidote for Vatak. Now the harem is guarded by some very large angry eunuchs who have some serious fighting skills. But if the party makes it into the harem, as soon as the door opens, a dozen young women start screaming and running towards the back door. This is a large square room containing a glowing crescent-shaped pool surrounded with comfortable cushions, poufs, and divans. Between the room's pillars hang transparent blue veils slowly floating in the draft. Magical spheres set in the walls of the pool below the surface illuminate the water, because the Sultan be fancy like that. Another way magic can be used to augment a magical world's environment. The Sultan's pool has a widespread reputation among visitors, officers, and the harem women for its legendary curing properties, probably because the southwestern globe's reflective portion is actually the cup of Al-Akbar, imbuing the water, touching it with some of its healing powers. Now, the stone encasing it must be chipped away to get it free, but once you do get it free, inside the cup is a medal engraved with the words, Al-Akbar is the true word. This happens to be the magical command word for the rod of rulership the great Mufti has, though he doesn't know it's a rod of rulership because he's never had the command word. And on the back of the cup appears the words, He who commands on the day of Al-Akbar is my son, the rightful ruler of Arir, Sultan Amhara. And with this information and the command words in hand, that's where the great Mufti can prove he is the rightful heir to the throne, and he owes it to the player characters. Now these harem girls, they got drugs and pleasures in here. Now, if the players engage with these harem women, their reaction proves that hoes ain't loyal. Now, I know they didn't want to be here. None of them chose to be here, but they can choose how they act. Everybody can choose that. And Hammack outlines 2 different ways that can go. One, if the player characters are good looking, then they'll be feted and dealt with obsequiously and just pampered in any way that they desire by the harem girls. Now, if they ugly, they're going to try to get them high and they're going to try to poison them to death. Because hoes ain't loyal. We get all this and more in 4 pages. That's it. And then the adventure just ends. And the fact that an adventure of this scale, and with this many coups, and this many terrorist attacks, and this many disturbances in subspace, just ends right here, might help illustrate to you why I was talking about the editing could have been way better on this. Because there are details about what happens after the fact, such as leaving K-Bar, which was in a previous chapter, and other details about how things shake out in the end that aren't at the end. They're scattered elsewhere around the module. But this is a good spot for me to talk about 2 other important parts of the module, the appendix and glossary, and the pre-generated characters that come with it. Now, the appendix section here talks about the artifacts themselves, the Cup and Talisman of Akbar, what they do, some of their history, and all kinds of other neat stuff about them. And really, the setup of the adventure came about, as Alan told us in that previous interview, he wanted to make a module that was about some powerful magical items, but not ones that players traditionally would go for. And he wanted to work those in, so that's why we got the disease, and the only way to cure it being these items that were previously published being the linchpin of saving the town. And you also get half a page of glossary of useful native terms. And what this amounts to is a long list of Arabic, Persian, North African, Near Eastern, Middle Eastern terms that describe items we already know, but describing them in this context, things we don't normally have in the West, and other ideas that could be new to us. I think this is really helpful and really neat because by being exposed to and mastering these terms, anytime you want to run an Al-Qadim adventure or any other adventure set in such a context, you've got a richer repertoire to deal with. So again, here, AD&D First Edition teaches us about a culture we might not already be exposed to, that we may find enjoyable bits to learn about, and this is a good thing. This isn't racist, Wizards of the Coast. This isn't problematic. This is exposing people to ideas that are new to them and that could potentially enrich their worldview. Heaven forbid we learn about each other. Then we come to the pre-rolled characters, and nothing wrong with them. It's just, this is kind of weird because this is set in a very 1001 Nights milieu, and then we get Dafydd, the half-elf druid, because apparently Welsh people live here. Ritter der Ritter. Yeah, that's as screamingly German as it comes, running around in plate mail in the desert, which is a terrible idea. Heat exhaustion will take that guy out in no time. Now we do get Heithfan, which is, I mean, maybe that's appropriate. But then we get Horus the Profound. Horus, yeah, that's a Turkish name right there. Okay, we finally get Tariq Elfissa, an elven thief. Okay, all right. So we got somebody that has something like that. And then we get Choji. So a East Asian character shows up in this? All right. So you see, the pre-generated characters aren't necessarily the most appropriate for the setting. They feel kind of tacked on. But given the lethality of this adventure, I might recommend you run this as a one-shot using these pre-generated characters instead of using homegrown, long-running, much-beloved player characters. Unless they're true adventures and they love a challenge, which is what they're supposed to do. So if you ever come across a situation where you think, oh, that's too dangerous for my character, is it too dangerous for your character, who is an adventurer and who lives for the thrill and to prove they're better than everybody else? Or does it not make sense to someone who grew up in a relatively pampered lifestyle afforded by modern capitalism? Maybe you should play the character and not you. Day of Akbar is available for purchase in hard copy from various aftermarket sources and PDF from DriveThruRPG. Since Wizards of the Coast posts its standard denunciation of the people who made it on DriveThruRPG, I wouldn't recommend that method. The PDF can be found on a certain archive site that doesn't denounce Alan and company, so maybe you can find it there. None of the people who created this gets a dime from new purchases. But if you want to express your appreciation for Alan's work, feel free to send him a gift card from Fairhope Brewery. Believe me, that guy will drink it, and their beer is really good. On YouTube, I only found one other review of this module, but this guy both doesn't understand the module and complains about things missing from the module that are in fact in the module. Instead of watching his ill-conceived video, I would recommend the many Islamic radicalization videos that come up when you search for Day of Akbar in YouTube and on Rumble. If you enjoyed this review, I too enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so be sure to do that and share this around to your friends. Hopefully one of them will get the bug and decide to run it for you, and then you too could survive the Day of Akbar. Have you ever played, ran, or read Day of Akbar? If so, please let me know what you thought in the comments. How did that go? Were there any things that stuck out to you that you want to talk about? I'd love to hear it. So as we do, dear friends, part for now. I wish you nothing but the best.